Hi, I'm Donald Pitt, the founder and Managing Director of Quality Building Management. As you can see from this list, I hold a large number of licences and qualifications to be able to discuss this topic with you today. I hold trade qualifications in carpentry and joinery and wall plastering, and I've been a registered builder since 1981. I have licensing to conduct and certify fire equipment, am a safety professional, fire safety advisor and an asbestos auditor. Now, the topic today is fire safety for commercial properties and owners corporations with a commercial component in New South Wales. What is 1851? Well, it's an Australian standard for the routine servicing of fire equipment. There was a major review conducted on the old 2005 version, and that was released in December 2012. It's to be implemented on 1st January 2015. Now, there are state referencing back to Australian Standard 1851 for all states except New South Wales and Western Australia. But can 1851 be used in New South Wales and WA? So the answer is yes. Of course, without abiding by this standard, there is no other method to successfully maintain fire equipment. So what is the legislation we're talking about here? Well, it's the EPA Act 1979, the EPA Assessment Regs 2000, Work Health and Safety Regulations 2011, and then AS 1851. So what are the changes to the Australian Standard 1851 that affect you? Well, in a nutshell, there's less servicing required. So if you look at these lists here, there's a number of the weekly and monthly and yearly testing have been replaced or been removed completely. But for evacuation now, it used to talk about evacuation, now it's emergency planning and facilities. So there's now a requirement for 6 monthly reviews of your emergency management plan and a 1 yearly review plus evacuation practice. The other major change is for logbooks. So logbooks can be electronic and you can still use tags for extinguishers and so on, but the new item here is that when you do use tag system, you must still leave a summary log on site. And fire doors still need to have 6 monthly and 12 monthly test, but no 3 monthly test unless it's actually a sliding fire door. So how do these impact or changes impact upon the commercial property? Well, if you have any of the following items I've listed here, there's less servicing. So get your maintenance contractor to ensure that they only don't over-service and service to the new standards, which is limiting your cost. But also make sure that they leave a summary log on site when they do use a tag system. And you must have this management or emergency management plan in place and review it every 6 monthly and conduct an evacuation practice every 12 months. So what's the linkage between AS 1851 and in EPA Regs 2000? Well, New South Wales do not reference 1851. So New South Wales refers to the fire equipment as essential fire safety measures. Now, the fire safety measures are items that are listed on the original fire safety schedule when the building was constructed. So the legislation says that you need to maintain the items on the fire safety schedule into or according to the standard specified on that schedule. But when the items aren't on that schedule, you must maintain them to the originally designed standard. So most fire safety schedules reference the BCA and Australian standards. Most then Australian standards reference 1851, or in the case of emergency lights and exit lights, the implementation or the installation of those lights are covered by AS 2292.1. But that refers to Australian Standard 2292.2, which is the servicing, which is the Australian standard. Thus, if you can get my drift here, even though New South Wales doesn't reference 1851, in a roundabout way, it does, because it refers to the BCA, the Building Code of Australia, and Australian standards for the installation, which then refers to the standard for maintenance of these fire items. And the majority of councils and the fire service recommend to maintain equipment to AS 1851 because there is no other standard. So what are the requirements now of the work health and safety regulations? It also covers the need to maintain fire equipment, but in section 43, it talks about emergency plans. So you must prepare, maintain, and implement an emergency management plan. So let's go back to my talking about the EPA Act, the 1851, now linked to the Work Health and Safety Act as well. So where have commercial property owners and buildings been failing? Well, fire doors are a big item. Fire doors have not been tested, and in many cases, they're in poor condition. Fire safety statements have not been submitted, or if they have been submitted, many items have been left off, and one of those major items are fire doors. Fire walls and penetrations have never been inspected, and maintenance records have not held on site. Fire evacuation plans have not been reviewed, and if there was an old fire evacuation plan, it hasn't been updated to an emergency management plan. Evacuation practice haven't been conducted regularly, and training of your staff in the first response, which is the use of fire equipment, and evacuation training have not been given. So what do you need to do? Well, firstly, you need to obtain a copy of the original fire safety schedule, which lists all the essential fire safety measures on site. Conduct an audit to ensure that compliance to the maintenance requirements of that fire safety schedule by a qualified person. And then inspect all fire walls and penetrations on a periodic basis. Ensure all the fire equipment is maintained in accordance with the fire safety schedule or to the originally installed standard, and ensure that for commercial properties, ensure that all fire doors are tested at least every 6 months, and make sure all those maintenance logs are kept on site, either in a fire cabinet or somewhere else to protect them from effects of fire, and develop an emergency management plan and review that emergency management plan on a 6-monthly basis. Also, conduct an evacuation practice every 12 months. Train persons in the use of fire equipment and evacuation procedures, and ensure that you send a correctly completed fire safety statement to the local authority each year. Now, what if you don't comply? Well, look, there's legal considerations and there's fines and penalties under the EPA Act and the health and safety regulations. But what are the other implications? Let's consider insurance for a minute. Would the insurance cover you in case of a fire if you don't comply? Well, I've put that question to the insurance companies, and their answer is, it depends. Now, what does it depends mean? Well, they won't say. So it may mean that they'll cover you, or they may not cover you. They may cover you where areas that you are compliant to legislation, and they may not cover you in other areas where you are not compliant. We just don't know. So are you prepared to take that risk? The other item to consider is loss of possessions. Can all your personal possessions be replaced? And can you afford to replace them? The other major consideration here, though, is loss and injury of life. What money saving are you prepared to put on a person's life? Is the few $100s required for compliance really worth a serious injury? I'm Donald Pitt, and thank you for your time today.